I'm your host, Colin Dowe, and I'm looking forward to the ride with you this evening. As I always do, thank you. Thank you so very much for joining us, bringing us into your homes, into your cars, wherever you may be, joining GBN television, listening on any of the GBN radio outlets or our social media platforms. The show is because of you, and we're certainly happy that you're able to join us this evening. We are in March, and probably no surprise, we're going to be taking a look at the revolution's contribution to Grenada. We'll zero in particularly on the economic legacy as well as the education legacy of the revolution as we look at present-day Grenada. And I have two esteemed gentlemen who are with me this evening. I will begin in studio and then go to the other online. Dr. George Mitchell, welcome.
Thank you, Colin, and it's great to be back in studio. And good night to your esteemed listeners, wherever they are, riding in their cars, in their living room. It's just a pleasure to be here, and particularly in March. And it's not to do anything with COVID. Not to do anything with COVID. That's what I would like to pitching for now. Mm-hmm. And, for those who don't know me, I'm still around. A few folks have asked me, where have you been? And surely I've not been blown away by the vaccines. Okay. I'm still a very strong advocate for vaccines, and I'm giving one to the Ministry of Health here. That's one, on their shoulder. Right. Very strong advocate for vaccination. I think it's one of the greatest goods of health since, way back. And I'm here and I'm ready to discuss about how important, how crucial the period of the revolution was for Grenadians in general.
Okay. And online we have Mr., or I should say Ambassador Tarley Francis. Good evening and welcome, Your Excellency.
Good evening, Colin. Thank you very much. Good evening to you, Dr. Mitch. Glad to be on this program with you. So, Colin, we're very happy to be able to say a few words and, discuss in public on your program some information that we have, some ideas that we received, and, just basic what comes through in the revolutionary period. Where we spent some time myself as a student and a youth leader, and in post of the revolution, had the opportunity at least to look back at some of the programs and what they really meant, and in many cases also still mean for the foundation building of Grenada.
And without
glad to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Without aging you, you said as a student at what level?
Yeah, and when the revolution started in '79, I was among the first persons who went into the Institute for Further Education, IFE, now TAMCC. So that tells you where I was. So I was just leaving Form 5, going into Form 6, that would have been.
Okay, all right. And let's just jump off immediately. We'll start off in taking a look at the economics of Grenada, because that's important, bread and butter issues. And if you can just do some reflection, though, before we get to the 79 to 83 period and the interventions that were made, what type of economy, both in terms of structure and what was the mainstay of the Grenada's economy in the 1970s, on the verge of the 1979 revolution?
Okay, so the economy was pretty much agriculture-based, export-oriented agriculture, was really the frame of Grenada's economy through the 70s, and the principal source, the main source of income, of employment, was actually in agriculture as well. There was some fishing, but agriculture, there was some tourism, but agriculture really is what was the backbone. And we had the principal source of income in agriculture, and as I said, an export-oriented kind of agriculture, where the main crops were banana, cocoa, and nutmeg, banana, cocoa, and nutmeg. So these would have formed somewhere in the region of about 90% of the value of our domestic exports. And the fluctuation in prices of those commodities would have been a challenge that the economy faced at the time. We move from you move from one price to another depending on what's happening in the countries that are purchasing. We had in the 70s also a sort of a global recessionary period. So inflation was high, and rising prices led to what we get from abroad being more costly. So the exchange that you receive, the monies that you receive from your main agricultural crops went out very easily in the imports, and the imports were, as I say, prices were high.
Are
so
you referring to the oil crisis?
Not just for Grenada, but it was a globally bad economic period, you could call it.
Right.
And Grenada, being a small economy, and an economy where since then we imported such a large portion of the consumables that we have in Grenada, it meant that we feel the pinch immediately. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So in that period, Colin, the infrastructure was not, very well developed, as you may know. By infrastructure, I mean the roads. The state of the roads, even the water supply was not there. The integrity of the housing stock was also, very low. So that was the kind of economy that you had. And in that economy, you ended up coming through the 70s. And although we attained independence in 74, you had other things happening on the political side, on the social side. You had the Black Power movement and things like that. In Grenada, you had a lot of turmoil as well. And hardships included shortages of consumables, of products,
Mm-hmm. Okay. As just how, will you give us a sense as to how those industries, coconut, banana, was performing, and the challenge because of the oil crisis, for example, around the 73-74 period, and with inflation, we basically spent all our money and was getting less, so the bang for the buck wasn't really there. Were there any cottage industries? I mean, in growing up, you've heard that there was a soap factory, there were various things. Did we have any of these types of industries during the course of the 1970s?
Yeah, one of the you could say the failures that we were experiencing all the way into helping that this condition was created for a popular revolution is that you had things like even handicrafts in Grenada that was not Grenadian. It was imported from maybe Asia or some other Caribbean island as well. You talk cottage industry, you had even hotels here that were not using the local produce. You had certain support that a cottage industry needed that just was not there. So in the Grenada context, the 70s, you're looking at a period when even when you go to look at tourists on the beach purchasing something local, probably the only local component might have been that the garment was sewn by a Grenadian seamstress. You talk cottage industry also, you're looking at what about jams and jellies and so forth. Yes, we cannot say there was not. but the economy was not so structured so that it could really make these cottage industries into something that provided an income for those who are involved in it. And so even if you speak like, for example, the fisher folk were doing things like preparing the codfish and the dried fish and so on as a means of not having wastage out of the product, and yet that as an industry never really could take off because the marketing for it wasn't there. The technology even for cottage industry was very expensive to purchase and to maintain your boilers and things like that. Was really not taken shape. And then you had also the problem that on the farms, because in the 70s we also, coming down to the 70s, we also saw a lot of farms becoming state farms. I think there were about 30. At the time of the 79 revolution, there were about 30 state farms. And on these farms, 40% of the arable lands that you're talking about on the farms were actually idle, so productivity, even in the agricultural sector, was low. So, you had those you could call them wastages and seepages of a productive economy that really did not bring home the bacon, even for cottage industry, you could say.
Okay. Let me just give you a chance, George, to reflect on the 1970s economy, and both in terms of your own experience. I know you were a youngster then, but upon reflecting, what type of economy that existed in terms of your own area, what was the mainstay, what was bringing home the bacon?
All right, I think first of all, the bacon wasn't being brought home, and I have to say that it's really a pleasure to be on set with Tali as well. Well, our ambassador Francis, Tali and I go back really, really, really far, from the days of IFE turned into T.A. Marisho College, and we also coincided in Havana, Cuba, and we had some really, really memorable, moments that wouldn't be, etched in, one's memories. So I wanted to say it's a pleasure to be here with Tali, and when I hear Tali speak about what happened, and that's his forte, of course, economics, I was reflecting on what was happening in my area, and Colin, sadly, it was the big trucks going down with bananas, nutmeg, and cocoa. In other words, that was a main feature coming from the estates in St. Andrews, in the main. And then, the next thing that ran into my mind was the fact that in areas like Las Vegas, I don't know how many of our listeners know where Coles Gap is. The name Coles Gap came out from the fact that people at that time were burning coals throughout multi-content and were toting them down there to get sold. In other words, it was that backward the economy was. At that time, people were struggling to make ends meet, so the bacon wasn't coming home, in my view. And apart from that, it was, like Tali said, fishing. My father was a fisherman, the little seamstress that my mom was, and people working travel and the estates. I mean, apart from, of course, the few who went to secondary schools, or if you had a good diploma in primary school, you ended up being a teacher. It was that bad from where I came and for what I understood to have been happening at the time. It was depressing for me.
Right.
That's my personal experience.
Okay. And let's just move now, 79 to 83, Tali. What, in your belief, was the economic philosophy of the revolution?
Right. So again, in the backdrop of the 70s, I just wanted to add before speaking about the 79 itself. Colin, the most, I think the most telling and revealing elements of what that period was for Grenadians in general is the unemployment rate. The unemployment rate, in fact, was recorded, very, very high. It was given at 35% in some official documents, and in reality, it was somewhere about 49% when surveyed. This means that like almost 1 out of every 2 persons who could work did not have a decent job, could not consistently expect to receive a salary or a wage somewhere. That's a very telling thing. And you see, it's very important because it means that with a labor force, 50% of it almost was out of production, out of operation, out of work. It means that was energies that were being wasted and put into other things. So there was that inflation.
Can I just interrupt you here?
Very telling thing. It was very high, I say 40
just for clarity, Tali, if I can. Was that... I know sometimes even today we struggle with the definition of unemployment, not the theoretical definition, but in capturing people's ways of life. Was that an issue in terms of there is an economic definition for unemployment, but it doesn't mean that necessarily that people are starving or living hand to mouth because they are earning and living otherwise. And there's a particular parish in Grenada that comes to mind that when those surveys are done, they go to the bottom, but they not necessarily be the ones that are struggling the most.
Right. So we have and still do have an informal economy, an informal sector, a sector that is not even recorded, you could say, because they are not captured in established institutions as employees. So Grenadians, we are very creative, we are very resilient as well. So yeah, you will find people who were not starving, they were eating, they were finding things to eat, but it must be clear that the people did not have work. They didn't have, forgetting about the theory of what is unemployment and just reflecting on the 70s, where we had such a large number, especially among the youth and also among the women. I believe it was Clement Curtin or Dabrio, one of these Grenadian thinkers, who gave 80% of women able to work was not working. No, they were not working. So, Colin, what it means is that they perhaps would have made some coconut sugar cake, and they could put some flour on the table, but they were unemployed. They were not having a job. And so the informal economy would have handled and helped us to turn the hand, as we say. But there was unemployment. And among the youth, and one of the places where you see it is the way in which the People's Revolutionary Army filled up so quickly with both male and female subscriptions among the youth. These are not people who had to leave some job to go to there. They actually were, many of them already not employed and just waiting for somebody to give them a job. Mm-hmm. So that is one of the things, and also the amount of lands that we had, because one of the first programs when we go into 79 that would be put in place was the marrying of idle lands with idle hands. So that program could even be conceptualized and brought to reality quickly within a single year because of the high level of unproductivity we had through the rate of unemployment. Of course, inflation was running high, real high. So prices were going sky high, and that's why you find that one of the principal informers or ideas behind what you can then call the philosophy of the PRG would be coming out of even the NGM manifesto. It would be to stop inflation. In other words, stop this this constant rise of prices. Every time you go to the shop, something costs you more than it cost you yesterday. And the second thing was to develop a program or a series of programs which is, integrated enough to be able to increase the standard of living of the people of Grenada, and those programs will now come to be part of the PRG's programs.
Okay.
So, Colin, if that is good, I'll go on to the question now. Mm-hmm. Yes, the economic focus of the revolution was steeped heavily in an attempt to have what you could call economic equality, trying to better the lives of all the people using the resources that are available to us. So the policies would be to ensure that there is a job for every person, and to ensure that the fairness with which we live in a house will be the same fairness with which we live in the whole country. So it's more or less something like that. And so what the revolution sought to do was to reduce the policy, the thinking was to reduce the dependence on the imports. So you increase the level of your production at home for your feeding of yourselves, feeding of your people, and so agriculture is important for that. And you reduce the amount that you spend outside, so you reduce the level of imports as well. You also, in the revolution's mind, the revolution is saying we have to get the people at the level of production that is, worthy of a modern state. So you have to do education. You have to create the condition where people in the country understand and they know what they are doing in the production field. You cannot get to factories unless you have people who are having the capability of measurements and countings and so on. So the education is important, and so that's why one of the first things the revolution would do was to say, in order for us to bring our economy to a modern state, we have to have people who are able to transcend that limit we had on illiteracy, bring that down. Then rearrange a curriculum so that even the agricultural sector would become a sector that is learned, a sector that is benefiting from the education system. So you had that also as important. And then the revolution sought now to increase or diversify the agricultural-based economy. So not just cocoa, sugar, and so on, but to develop agro-industries that can take care of the wastage that we had, but at the same time, it can diversify our agriculture and give the farmers in the agro-processing market, to give the farmers a market, so to speak, for their produce. The first thing that the revolution did, among the first thing that it did, was to put a freeze on certain products, certain basic necessities, food items especially, and then to introduce the Marketing and National Importing Board, which was a national importing board first, because it was to take care of ensuring that the prices are not going haywire on the basic things like flour, sugar, rice. And then it became the Marketing and National Importing Board to ensure that we have an avenue through which we commercialize in the economy the new agriculture. And new is in inverted commas here because the staple exports will be kept, but you will diversify into other products, other commodities and so. And then finally, in the revolution's mind, there was to be a three-sector approach to economic development and growth. And this was deliberate. So there would be the state sector, and some people mistakenly say the state sector was dominant, had to be dominant, that the revolution made it dominant. But in truth and in fact, there are a lot of hotels, agricultural farms, and some other industry items that that the revolution met were already state enterprises. The father of the independence had already taken a lot of these things, into state control. So the revolution said there should be the state sector. The state alone cannot build the economy, so there should be the private sector. In fact, the private sector remained dominant throughout the 4.5 years as well. And thirdly, there should be a rise in the cooperative sector. And the cooperative sector should play a significant role in reducing unemployment, so you increase employment, but at the same time, you build a certain level of equity, equality in the ownership rights and in the return on the production of the people. So many other small things would happen in and between, but basically what the revolution did, the philosophy was to have the state sector supported with the private sector and the cooperative sector, and let these be three sectors moving the economy forward together. The state would play the principal role of facilitating by ensuring the infrastructure is built. You have to build the roads. For example, that's where all the feeder roads and so on came in. You have to build the infrastructure. You have to prepare for the new tourism as well. So the international airport was extremely important for tourism, but also as a gateway for the diversified agriculture exports and what will come out of agro-processing.
All right. Let me just have George come in and just speak. Because one of the things was the linkage between economic development and education, and just speak a little bit as to the benefits of this surge in access to training and what that meant for the Grenadian economy.
Well, to me, Colin, the transformation of the economy, of the thinking, as Tali said, goes back to how well people are appreciative or understand what should be done. So I want to even go down to the basics, like the Center for Popular Education. As Tali said, that program sought to taught folks who didn't have an opportunity how to count, how to read, how to write, how to understand what was going on. So that was at the basic level. But if we want to go a bit higher, the revolution gave numerous Grenadians the opportunity to get university education that was indeed transformative. I don't know of another period in Grenada's history, ever, and that could always be debated, when so many persons of, I would say, very humble and poor backgrounds got the opportunity to go to get a university education that not only transformed themselves, but transformed their families and almost the entire country with what they achieved. And for that, I should not say a single word now, except for saying how grateful I am personally, and many other Grenadians, and I'm sure by extension the country, to the people of Cuba, for facilitating, in the vast majority of cases, the university education, this specialist education that were afforded to Grenadians. And that was free of cost. I mean, there's always someone paying for it. It was the Cuban people, the backs and sweats of the Cuban people, and for that, I'm eternally grateful, and I'm sure many others like me are eternally grateful as well. And you know, Colin, it's important to note that at the time of the Grenada Revolution in '79, the Cuban Revolution was only 20 years. 59, 69, 79, 20 years. And for that short period of time, they were able to offer and do that. This is like, almost unheard of. I don't know of another country who's been able to do that, and they continue to do that under very, very, very testing conditions. But to speak directly, I can sit here and speak for hours about persons who have gone in different areas of endeavor and contribute to Grenada. However, I think later on, I'd like to concentrate on the medical professionals who have gone to Cuba, studied, come back, and make what I would describe as immeasurable contribution to Grenada, to production, and to well-being, and to, in a way, you can do a thesis on that, to where we are today as a result of their contributions.
All righty. Time is slipping by, so it is time for our first break, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll be right back to continue discussion on the contributions of the revolution.
Makes its way to the Kirani James Athletic Stadium, March 12th, 13th, and 14th. 88 events, 25 schools, 3 days, and 2 champions. Make history and witness the first ever Intercall March Pass competition amongst participating schools, days 1 and 2. Who would it be in 2024? Come out in your colors, support your alma mater. Day 1 will be electrifying, day 2 pulsating, and day 3 will end in a crescendo as history will be made in the National Stadium. Tickets are available at the gates of the National Stadium, gotofed.com, and Grenadian Optical.
Have you heard about the new Softweave bathroom tissue with total hygiene? As hygiene and safety have taken center stage, our bathroom tissue is now manufactured with 3 different technologies to offer the best protection for you and your family. UVC light technology for a safe and effective disinfection process, eliminating 99.9% of microorganisms. Also, production at high temperatures, killing all types of germs and bacteria. And it's pH controlled with delicate fibers to prevent irritation for even sensitive skin. Softweave Total Hygiene Bathroom Tissue, available in supermarkets and shops island-wide. Visit Softweave Caribbean Facebook or Instagram pages for more information.
Welcome back, and of course we're speaking about the contributions of the revolution, focusing on the economic contributions as well as the educational legacy. We'll give you a chance to weigh in, and just about 1:15, you certainly can feel free to begin calling and sharing your views on this theme. Toddy, if I may, you mentioned that the vision of the revolution was to have 3 sectors, as it were, in terms of the driving force. Yes, state, private sector, and cooperatives. Speak to us a little bit as to the state enterprises that were taken on during the revolution.
Okay, so we know that the banking sector was extremely important. So the state actually entered banking. I guess you can say to ensure that the money, they have some control over the money and the money movements. So that was extremely important. Banking was taken care of by state enterprise, the government getting into banking. That is the bank which is the National Commercial Bank, which was later on divested to, and it was that is what is today Republic Grenada. There was also the Bank of Commerce, which I believe was CIBC before that. So there was that. The government got involved in the banking sector. In the agricultural sector, we had all of the state farms that were already there, somewhere in the region of 30 or so, and the government actually got involved with that. Not divesting it, not sending it over to private sector and so on, but actually managing and administering it itself. In fact, I think there was a state, not I think, but there was a state corporation formed, the Grenada Farms Corporation. Grenada Farms Corporation was formed as an entity. It is a state entity, and the objective of it was to really ensure high level of productivity through effective management of these of the respective farms. During that period, the state even went to pass a People's Act. I seem to recall it was either 20 or 21, but this was an act which was passed in order to facilitate the use of idle lands for agricultural production, particularly by persons who wanted to farm the land. So if there was idle land anywhere around, then it would be used. The state actually created a land development and utilization corporation. This is an entity that the PRG gave the right to. If anybody came to you, they found land, they want to use the land for productive purposes, and it is not being used, then a feasibility study is done on it. If it can be used, then and you have people willing, then the state will lease the land and have the workers work it in conjunction with the State Farm Corporation as an entity. So you had that involvement as well in agriculture. Of course, as you know, the Marketing and National Importing Board, that became a major tool of the state for ensuring economic stability. The price stability is what the Marketing and National Importing Board sought to address when it was just started as a National Importing Board. And then later on, the government would expand it in order to create a state entity or in that state entity to create somewhere where farmers' produce will be indeed finding a market. And you put an entity, you put people there, their job is to ensure that farmers who have things to sell have a place where they can sell it, and the Marketing National Importing Board had to buy it. So you had training and so on, education formed part of that as well. So that was there. Then we have to speak about the agro industries. The state actually decided that it will get involved in agro industries. It will actually create enterprises, and I think there were two. One was doing coffee and something else, and the other an agro processing plant to do juices and so. In that project, there was a marrying of the planting of even more mangoes of certain variety during the period of that revolution as well. So you had that involvement in production by the state. Again, I hasten to say that it's not like the state, that in many areas where there were revolutions, you find that the state had nationalized this and nationalized that. In the Grenada Revolution's case, private enterprise continued to exist, and to some extent you can say thrive as well, because the level of activity that the
let's go on to some examples there.
Cool. Are you there?
Yes, so just go on to some examples in terms of the support for private enterprise now. So we got, in terms of the state enterprise, the other pillar that you mentioned was private enterprise. So some of the support and the examples of thriving.
Yes, well, the louder part of the private sector that was in at loggerheads with the revolution, included those that were in your field, in the media and in journalism and so, specifically, the newspapers and things like that. But in terms of the shops, in terms of the transportation, the taxi people, the bus people, etc., they will receive some incentives. In fact, even up to today, the GDB, the Grenada Development Bank, is a go-to place for
let me just interrupt you here.
And so.
Because you stated three pillars: public sector, private, cooperatives. You're not. So I'm trying to seek, and we got the examples in terms of the government getting involved in the banking sector, the movement in terms of idle hands for idle hands, as well as the agro industries. Those were state. What initiatives enhance private sector development? And you mentioned the word thriving, so I'm certainly looking for examples there.
Yes. Well, let's speak about the private sector involved in construction. Because of the increased infrastructure, build roads and feeder roads and the international airport and so, heavy equipment companies, contractors, they actually got, you could say, they got the benefit of having more contracts. In terms of the hotels and so, every year the revolution would promote programs and so on, and that would give them room space and so. But they fill rooms. But what would happen is that the international airport would be something that is unfinished during the revolutionary period, which would be very important for them as well, for the private sector as well. So no, I'm sorry. I missed the last point.
If I may, I missed the last point. My question is, was tourism a thriving sector during the revolution?
And I would say tourism was, we had, I would say, probably I should say no, but it thrived to the extent that it could have. And the incentive for that would have been these events and so on that the revolution would have, and people will come in, maybe there would have been 3 or 4 per year. So tourism suffered during the revolutionary period because, in addition to the fact that you had a heavy campaign against Grenada on the international scene by powerful media and powerful countries, you also had the fact that the developing countries were suffering economic hardships. So the tourism sector in all of the Caribbean really did not really increase in that period, but the revolution gave incentives to, as far as I could recall, to hoteliers and so, and some of them probably, spicing might be an outlier, but some of them, they did receive their tax concessions and things like that, which continued for them. So I would say we will struggle to find that the revolution did a particular thing for private sector to thrive, but we would also struggle to find that the revolution impeded the private sector from thriving. No, it didn't. In fact, it enabled the private sector to continue in operations and to do so as it promoted the divestment of the agricultural sector and as it tried to stimulate the linkage or the marriage between agriculture and tourism.
You would recognize that you seem to be contradicting yourselves here, because the idea is that you said that these industries, agro-processing, etc., was public. They were state-owned. And the controlling of finances, for example, by the banks would not have limited the access to the private sector. So can you, in one breath, say it did not impede, although it didn't thrive, when these key areas were now state-controlled?
Yes, but it wasn't. You had banks other than the state bank. Scotiabank, for example, remained. So what I'm saying is that in the vein that you look for what the revolution did for the private sector, we need to see it from the perspective that the revolution actually facilitated the continuing operations of the private sector in an environment which was not restrictive. It was an environment that had increased level of activity, increased level of employment, increased level of education. So I wouldn't say that we contradict him, because although the government owned the bank, the government did not really say nationalize all banks. This wasn't the case. It actually took care of the banks that it had owned, and that did not crowd out the private sector from receiving capital for its own growth. So I would put it that way, Colin.
Okay, Colin, I just wanted to weigh in on the question you asked Tali about tourism. I'm not an expert, mind you. I'm putting that out there, but I remember vividly reading recently that the tourism product grew. It was both regional tourism as well as tourism coming from particularly North America. And it was not as we know it today, obviously, but prior to the revolution, that was almost non-existent.
Well, let's correct this. 1976 cruise ship arrivals, as an example, was not rival until about 86.
All right, so cruise ship. So you beat me with that one, because I was not thinking tourism cruise ship. So
but the majority of our tourist arrivals remained North America. Right. There was an embargo on Grenada. So I mean, tourism dipped. It's reasonable to believe that it dipped.
Airlift. I was talking about airlift and the gateway that was created, not tourist arrival by cruise ships. No, I don't know. I don't have the figures, and I'm not going there. And I recall very well, if you'd allow me to say that you were the chairman of one of the boards, so you're speaking from
well, if we're speaking the tourism industry in general, because I think as was cited, I mean, Grenada was doing well. Then we had a revolution that was against, philosophically, what was taking place in North America, which was a major source market, and hence there was a boycott. I mean, so that's easy to understand.
Correct.
So one will get that, but the other things within the economy, and I want you to move on in terms of the benefits of an educated society, in terms of that investment and what that means for the growth of a country.
So the way I pitch it and the way I analyzed it, and I may be incorrect here, but to add education and educated citizenry to your workforce multiplies in ways that it's sometimes difficult to measure. And as I said before, I wanted to sort of like concentrate this pitch on the medical professionals, because I don't have numbers and the exact fields. I know of persons who have been trained as engineers and their contribution to the building of roads, etc. But I analyze this from a public health standpoint.
How many, and if you can, as you answer, how many Cuban-trained physicians do we have in system now, approximately?
In system now, I can give you global figures. We have close to 90 persons, the exact number 87, that were trained in Cuba. A couple of them, unfortunately, left us. Robertson died in St. Lucia, and we lost a couple other comrades. We had about 9 dentists that were trained as well as 36 nurses. They're not as sort of like well known in the scheme of things, but as much as 36 nurses were trained there. We had some pharmacists that were trained in Cuba and some persons in vet. I think it was 10 of them. So when I look at all of those areas of endeavors, Colin, and I try to look at their contribution towards nation building, I look at it from a standpoint of how well they took care of our people. Because a good 36 years ago, and I'm talking about 1986, when the first batch of students came back, from thence to now, if you would try to figure out how many persons have come in contact with Grenadian physicians, dentists, vet, when I say persons, I mean that industry, I would say tens of thousands of persons have benefited, both directly and indirectly as a result of that. And I am not sure that we could actually put a dollar figure. You know, my friend Kennedy Roberts, who is into health economics, might be able to help us here. Or at some point in time, we may have to try to ask AI, artificial intelligence, to do that. Because for me, it is an area that has confused me when I'm trying to talk about man hours.
150 individuals being trained through the Q1 system in terms of investment in medical, yes, investment in people and impact, and that certainly will be significant. And
what it is, Colin, is that if you're not healthy, you can't produce.
Right.
And I'm talking about persons who have worked at different levels in the healthcare system. If you have a bad tooth and it's hurting you, you can't go to work. So the dentist took care of that. Preventative care in that area has been ongoing. I'm talking about persons who have even make policies. And we all know who she is from St. Mark's. And persons who have been trained to take care of persons even while you're not even born as yet. Those persons have been trained in Cuba. So I look at it from the perspective of adding value to the human being to be able to be productive in the Grenada context.
All right. Tony, you know, we speak in education, and share with us, why was, or seemingly, St. George's University protected during the revolution? You know, it started 1976 Act of Parliament, first class in January 1977, and through the 79 to 83 period, it appeared to have functioned unimpeded, although there were talks of some of the students actually CIA, etc. But it functioned even in that period, October 1983 through the 25th. There seemed to have been some protection. Why was that?
Right. Now, let me say that I don't know, like, for a fact that there was some protection per se, but I will tell you that this University School of Medicine, as it was, the St. George's University.
Well, let me just ask you to hold that thought, because we do have a caller online, so we'll come back to that thought. Good evening, caller. Welcome.
Good evening to both host and guests. Can I get a guarantee that the guests can hear me? I think one is off virtual.
Yes, the guest can hear you.
Very well. Very interesting information coming out here. We're making the connection with the revolution and economic development during that moment, or those years, and subsequently. Interesting. With a lot of education and otherwise. But I want to introduce some factors. Hello?
You go ahead, caller, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to introduce some factors briefly, which I consider they would have to be taken into consideration. Because they really did help in the advancement of the country during those One, political consciousness of the average Grenadian who had the capacity to understand what was going on and what we were looking towards. Sacrificial work, that also contributed. I don't know if the economists can put figures to that, but it did help. Conscientiousness, I refer to the doing of things and doing them well in the interest of the country into the future, and of course, volunteerism. Why do I raise these issues? Because nobody talks of them as if nothing ever happened during the revolution and henceforth. And that the things that were done then through these formats make no difference to the Grenadian people. Nobody talks of that. Airport was built with voluntary work. Voluntary work. Grenadians from 18 years up to the oldest was 54 who walked down the first sacrificial wages. When in St. George's, people were working $30, $40 a day. They were working for $18 and $22 a day. 7 to 6 to build that iconic job that was that down there now representing the people of Grenada. That also, these factors also contributed to the development of our country, and today up to today we still enjoying them. Just for what it's worth, I thought I'd drop in these.
Yes, and these are the intangibles that one can reference in terms of the benefits of the revolution. Certainly, that revolution, and it coalesces that type of motivation to contribute. But Tali, let's finish your thought on the St. George's University during the revolution.
Oh, yes. Look, the St. George's University, from the time it's established itself up to today, is a major contributor to Grenada's economy and economic activity. It may not be one that is measured precisely. I think the inclusion of it is being done these days under the planning minister, Honorable Andrews. He refers to this from time to time. During the revolution, the school had all its license and everything, but it is not something that was a target of the Grenada Revolution. It did not hurt the Grenada Revolution. It did not damage the people of Grenada, anything like that. And, these students, they rent places in Grenada, they rent vehicles, they buy, they trade, they consume from our supermarkets, and their contribution to economic activity you can't hide it. And for this reason, during the period of the revolution, just like there would have been, important pre-revolution and post-revolution, the St. George University is an extremely important institution and an extremely important entity. And it is people, and in itself, it is like an economy that is down there. So you do find that there is, I couldn't say that it was protected in that sense of the word, but again, there was no quarrel with the St. George's University as far as the revolution is concerned. Okay. And for that reason, it continued to operate and contribute to the economy as it did.
Let's take the caller. Good evening, caller. Welcome.
Hi, good evening. Good evening to you, gentlemen. Just one quick thing there on tourism, because I happen to have been a part of that. Colin did mention that, for want of a better word, tourism was more or less on hold. And yes, there was a sort of blacklist of Grenada for a while. But I would say to you that the structure that we have even today for the development of tourism in Grenada started during the revolution, because I was a part of that. In 1983, for the first time, ironically, just before the revolution came to an end, that was the first time we trained folks for overseas offices. That's the first time we had overseas offices set up. North America, in Europe, Terry Forrester was in Europe. I was appointed to go to North America, then eventually I didn't go. We had Canada. First time we had overseas offices and sales representatives established for Grenada. We also had public relations firms from overseas. All those structures that we still use were established, ironically, months before the revolution ended. So it's not correct to say that tourism was more or less dead or it didn't happen. What is happening now happened because of what was done in the last few months of the revolution. Even Carnival, the Spice Master we know today, the decision to put Carnival in the summer, take it away from the shadow of the Trinidad Carnival, happened in 1983. So all those things that boost tourism, all the benefits we're getting today, they came out of that vision of 1982 and early 83. So I thought I'd just put that plug in there for whatever it's worth. Thank you.
All right, and if we need to fact check, the August Mass started in 81. All right, so I think we'll do that just to fact check. And the movement of Carnival was because of the clash of independence. So the first movement away from the Lenten took place under the Gary administration because of the clash with the independence, and he didn't want anything to do, of course, with his Easter Water Parade. So they started playing with it, but it was cemented during the course of the revolution, and a perfect placement as far as I'm concerned, and an excellent contributor to our tourism product as it stands now. Just share with
Colin,
us. Go ahead.
This, if I may, Colin, on the question of tourism, right? I remember the revolution, the leadership of the revolution. They thought of tourism they thought of tourism a little different from the beach and sunshine kind of activity. It was part of the economic program as far as they're concerned, that increasing tourism would increase the amount of foreign exchange that we receive, and would increase the economy's diversification. So, but on the content of tourism, they tended to think that we should have a sociologically relevant tourism. So what that means is that the revolution saw tourism or the tourists coming here as coming to interact with our cuisine, to interact with our culture, and to present a market for, especially, you mentioned cottage industry a while ago, especially the growing products that were being diversified through the cooperative movements and through the cottage industry and so on. So I just mentioned that in terms of the tourism, because that was like a focus. It was like, we don't just go in for tourism. The airport would have opened the gateway, but even then, in terms of a policy and a thinking, it was to have a tourism that is that when people land here, they're treated well because we educated and we know how to treat them well. They interact with our food because we are producing so that they could get our cuisine, not what they are accustomed getting elsewhere. And that was the thinking, and that was sort of the thought of tourism.
We will come back on these very issues, because I certainly want to spend some time on this. But let's take our second break. So viewers, we'll be right back.
Planning and Development Authority of Grenada, PDA, is enforcing regulations to curb illegal, disorderly, and unauthorized development in several locations throughout the state of Grenada. The authority is concerned that structures mainly associated with vending are negatively impacting the environment, has undesirable public health and sanitation consequences, present obstructions to vehicle and pedestrian traffic, can become projectiles during adverse weather conditions, and generally affect the aesthetics of the nation. The PDA will work along with stakeholder ministries and institutions to effect the demolition, removal, and disposal of structures which fall in the category of illegal and disorderly development, commencing January 2024. In this regard, persons who vend in or occupy such illegal structures are advised to secure their personal belongings and have the structures removed ahead of the planned PDA demolition operations. These These actions of the PDA have become necessary to safeguard and protect public health and the environment, ensure the safety and well-being of all citizens and visitors, discourage any future disorderly construction, and encourage compliance to regulations pertaining to physical development in the state of Grenada. This is a message from the Planning and Development Authority of Grenada.
I'm a VIP. I'm a VIP.
I am a VIP. I am vaccinated. I am immunized. I am protected. Our children and nation depend on vaccination for immunization. Childhood vaccination is national priority. It is their protection from disease and sicknesses. Let's all be VIPs and safeguard our beautiful Grenada. I am DJ Blackstorm and I am a VIP health champion. Be a VIP like me.
Let's all be VIP champions.
A message from the Ministry of Health, Wellness and Religious Affairs. Be a VIP Childhood Vaccination and Immunization Campaign in collaboration with UNICEF and the Pan American Health Organization.
Wait to see my granddaughter.
Welcome back, viewers. We're talking the contributions of revolution to the Grenada's economy and its lasting legacy. But before we get back with the panelists, we have one caller online. So good evening, caller, and welcome.
Yeah, good evening, Colin, Charlie, and Mitch. I call you by these names not of disrespect, but because we are all, well, what should I say, comrades and contemporaries. Although I am the senior by age of all the three of you. I wasn't in on the early part of the program, but I just thought I would add a little bit, so I may not be properly oriented on the content. But just to say generally, I thought this was a very good discussion. The last contributor, in fact, opened up an area of real interest that I think I just briefly want to look at. To understand the revolution and to put into context its economic program. The program of the revolution was first detailed in the 1973 Manifesto of the New Jewel Movement, which was published somewhere in November 1973. As a matter of fact, I was the one who brought up the copies of the manifesto from Trinidad. It was then published at OWTU Publishing House, and I brought it up on a vessel. And that led to Gary researching the place where I stayed on Turtle Street and so on. Just as a brief moment of history. But the fact of the matter is that the economic program represented a national social democratic program within a non-capitalist framework. And it is not perchance that the first major thrust of the revolution in the transformation of an economy which still was primarily caught up within the throes of a plantation economy that had long faded away. The world economic conditions no longer saw the sustainability of that model of economic development. And the PRG program was founded on a clear understanding of how to transform the Grenada economy. and the service sector of tourism was seen as the main driver in that regard. So that in the first real meeting with Fidel and Morris, when Fidel put the question, how can we help you? Morris's response is, we need to build an international airport. So it was not guesswork and it was not perchance, but it was the pillar and foundation, right, in transforming the Grenada economy, moving it into a different sphere of organization, recognizing that the remnants of the plantation economy was insufficient to transform the lives of the Grenadian people. I just thought I should make that observation. So my friend is right, the last speaker, when he pointed out all of the details. And in that context too, the shift of Carnival was a policy decision made by the PRG. Because Carnival was being stifled by Trinidad, and we thought that in order to be able to exercise and squeeze the benefits while we lay the foundations for taking the economy along tourism, because the program I'm adjusting, if I may just add, of the move towards tourism was high-end tourism, was always the description of the PRG program. So I just thought I would just...
Thank you very much. Certainly appreciate your contribution there. All right. Tali, we're coming quite quickly to a close. And as I reflected on the things that you shared at the top, and certainly look at us in 2024, I'm a bit worried. At the opening, you mentioned that the tourists on the beach got things that were foreign. Maybe they were sewn by a seamstress in Grenada, but generally, you didn't say made in China, but effectively made outside of Grenada. Isn't that where we are today?
I would say that we have gone a long way from then, because we do have a very deliberate and purposeful direction that we go in with tourism. It would still be that you will find us having more foreign products than than is desirable. But we've gone a long way, because we have
after the revolution, we still have a case where there's limited in terms of agro-processing. We have seen a resurgence, certainly through our chocolates, but it isn't at a scale where it satisfies local demand or even being able to get out. And we're speaking 45 years now post. We're looking where we're satisfying the tourists. Last caller spoke of the cuisine that the tourists can enjoy, because they should be entrenched within Grenadian society. And we seem to be struggling. That should have, 45 years post, been a natural part of the product.
Okay. There is a program that the Grenada Revolution was embarking on that was not finished. We have to say that we have continued certain things, we have left certain things, we have left over other things, but I think that where Grenada is today, in the thinking of our people, in the maturity of our thoughts regarding our productivity and so on, is more advanced than where we were yesterday. We have a greater local capability, we have a greater human resource standard, human resource capacity.
But isn't that a fact of time? I mean, I'm not comparing the Grenadian exposure now to 1971 or even 1979 or 83, but I'm saying that when you look at in terms of relative terms, that consciousness, that conscientiousness that two callers ago mentioned, when we reflect on Grenada 2024, are we seeing this?
Colin, let me give Tali a break and let me come in here. Listen, in my simplistic way of seeing this, globalization is a very, very, very powerful force. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the power of mainstream television is a very, very, very difficult to combat. And for us to make or continue to make any serious dent towards changing that, if you want to call it, dynamics, it would take some time. It would take some deliberate effort on behalf of the current powers that be to change that. But it's not going to be, in my view, something that is going to happen overnight. Because
if we look at the scarcity, because you talk about the power of television, but we are struggling for local content.
So that's why we are here, part and parcel of trying to drum up for. But that's the stark reality of where we are in 2024. More needs to be done. More sustainability in terms of production needs to be done, because the reality is that sometimes you can get something here and some other times you can't get it. So the powers that be definitely would need to enact programs that allows for the sustainability of products.
Let me be a little bit controversial, and I'm not normally controversial at all. But let me challenge both of you to respond to this. Have the flowers of the revolution failed the revolution? In other words, if there was a thinking and a philosophy, and individuals benefited through education and otherwise, it's the practice and the reinvestment in the Grenadian people being actively practiced by those who benefited, or have they turned into being capitalists themselves and hence have ignored the populace? And hence we have a challenge with our youngsters moving smoothly through secondary school in particular, and we could focus in on our males. Hence we have challenges with having appropriate mentors for our youngsters, and we're saying and we're blaming television, whereas we had a system where there was mentorship within society, etc. And for those of us who benefited from this, aren't necessarily exercising it in order for us to have a nation that was envisioned during the revolution in terms of its philosophy for people and for economic growth. Either of you can respond.
I'll take the first salvo at that.
Okay.
4.5 years. Very, very short time in the historical context of what has happened. And in my view, there are good mentors, maybe not enough of us. And as I alluded to just now, in the scheme of things, there are powerful forces that dilute what folks have done and maybe continue to do. So it is not for an absence of positive mentorship, but maybe not enough in the context of the forces that are against it. At this time, I'm not sure if you're getting what I'm trying to say.
I'm allowing you to share with the viewers.
Yes, and that is how I see it. You're actually against a system that is persuasive in the other direction.
That during the 4.5 years, too, there were very powerful forces likewise.
Not as now, and as the two callers said before, remember the atmosphere, the voluntarism, the fact that we did not have mainstream and globalization as we do have now. We did not have those forces. Yes, we had detractors to the process, and that is I understood why, and folks would understand why now. But I don't think in the history of mankind the issue of globalism or globalization is as powerful.
One will argue that was what the Cold War was. The fight was over different things, but that global fight was on and well and alive during the Cold War, during the 79 to 83 period.
Not as penetrative. That's the point I'm making. In other words, we did not have smartphones, we did not have internet, we did not have those means that are penetrating society as we do have today.
And the question is how we utilize those tools for our own benefits and growth. But
absolutely.
Absolutely. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Colin, first of all, I want to say that I don't agree that those who benefited from the programs of the revolution are flowers of the revolution who have failed. I don't really agree that. I think you find in all walks of Grenadian life I'm saying almost all walks of Grenadian life, without being absolute, you find persons who are educated, persons who are trained, and a lot of these persons are now adults. They're mentoring youth as well. They have people growing up inside their companies, inside their ministries, and they're working positively. Those who are like Dr. Mitch, here with us this evening, have already gone through the system, working who are in the medical profession, medical field. They are the ones we see most. But you have a host of other persons, engineers, who are helping the integrity of our water system, the integrity of our buildings, and so forth. And I think all they come out of this revolution, and they remain, they're beneficiaries, yes, but they remain active to the extent that they can be at this time through what they do. So I think that where the point is probably that you may be asking, is it possible without having a popular democratic revolution with a leadership that is developing its program based on socialist principles, social democratic principles of economic equality and equity and the sharing up of the spoils and so, can the things that the revolution aspired to achieve still be achieved? Probably that's what you're asking. And the thing about it is that if you don't have the system that the revolution had in place, it is difficult to galvanize and integrate all the programs. So some people have said that the transformation agenda of the current administration is pretty similar, but it is not operating within the system that and with the ideological thrust that the revolution and its leadership did.
That's speak for saying that we had guns and we had a revolution, that when we say this is where we're going, this is where we're going. And that luxury is not afforded current administrations.
I wouldn't be as, to say that is to actually say that you did not have rights in Grenada other than the rights that the guns wanted you to have, and that is not true. Human rights
that statement there will be challenged. I don't think we'll discuss.
And Colin, there was a very large social. Sorry.
No, I'm saying in terms of the extent to which citizens had rights, that can be challenged and debated, but we're not going there tonight. I mean, that's not the focus of the conversation. But I am still challenging the beneficiaries, and the beneficiaries don't mean that you got a scholarship, but those who are influenced, like myself, on the philosophy and the thrust of have we stepped up sufficiently in order to contribute to Grenada's development?
But I would say yes, and I would say that is why we can see things happening now, which are out of the legacy of the revolution, such as, for example, to have a government that actually now says free education up to that is not good enough. We go in all in the vocational institutions, and we're going to pay tuition there. We go in the college, and we're going to pay tuition there. That is out of the consciousness that was being built from the revolution time as well. And what we are not to lose sight of is the fact that our people is continuing. I mean, this 50th anniversary that we're celebrating of independence is 50th anniversary of independence, of growth in our awareness, our consciousness, building up our society, our institutions, and so. And I mean, we have not gone back to an army. The country has not clamored for an army. We don't need an army at this time. Okay, so that nonetheless leaves room for the other things to progress, The national insurance scheme, the reorganization of things there, now that we've come to a certain light, is building on the original idea of why did we put this thing in place as part of the program then as well. Remember, we have the free medical and dental care at all government hospitals and clinics and so on. And now we want to do a preventative type of clinic, more than just this regular, you go there and get your thing solved for free. in the government institution. I mean, so I'm saying that, you know, we had those education is a right, not a privilege. That's what the revolution said. It is materializing over years, even after the revolution is no longer around. And so, you know, the quality and the relevance of what we go through as a people from stage to stage, I think, is really building on that legacy from there. I would close by saying on this that already in 1982, already the World Bank was saying that the model that was being used in Grenada was good. They actually commended Grenada in 1982 in official World Bank document and speeches, the revolution's program. And so that program, Colin, when we say, for example, how was the private sector aided and assisted? For example, I just mentioned the national insurance scheme, but also the safety and security of workers, the healthcare system, the daycare system, so that women could go to work in the private sector or public sector because they have a place to put their children, and that was given increased relevance for economic development, for economic growth.
Let me ask you this, just because you mentioned NIS, and of course the Pension Disqualification Act was quite a bit in terms of conversations recently. Are you aware whether there was a timeline to normalize the pension of public officers? I know that the revolution failed in October 83. But was there a timeline? Because, you know, it was unquestionable from the documents that they needed to be made whole. We are now in 2024 and they're only just being made whole. Was there a timeline that the revolution had envisioned?
I'm not aware. I can't. I'm not both on that. But of course, you know that in the way in which workers' rights were being championed by the revolution, put before anything else, you could well imagine, and I would be very surprised if that was not, you know, something properly that would be properly addressed in.
The language was clear. So the language was clear. So there was no question as to whether or not the public officer should have been made whole. The language was clear. The question is whether or not there was a timeline for the execution. And speaking of pensions, I don't know whether or not you're aware, because one caller mentioned, and you mentioned the number of individuals who moved towards the armed forces. And one of the things, whereas the salaries weren't necessarily high, there was a pension scheme within the PRA. Any ideas of what happened to that money? Did they benefit from it? Any answers there?
No, not for me. I don't know.
Not for me. I heard about it. I heard it mentioned and discussed. I don't know where it is.
Okay.
Could be good to ask.
The other aspect I would want to touch on, again, during the revolution, we had a public transportation system. When we speak of infrastructure, it's not just roads. It's getting people to work in a safe way. Not standing up by keep left 11 o'clock when you could be the victim of some sicko. Are we going to see a return to the provisions of public transportation that could get people moving to work and to entertainment, so that there can be an active nightlife as well, so that the economy can take over?
So you may be asking Ambassador Tali that question.
Well, of course.
But I'm telling you, but for me, yes, we should. In other words, I'm a strong supporter of ensuring that people move. If people don't move or can move, then the same thing to do with the economy is trotted. And you know, I have had instances in the recent months where you know, folks would tell me, Doc, I can't stay back. I can't stay and help out because I wouldn't get a bus after 5 o'clock in the evening. And that has its second point where productivity is concerned. You know, someone wants to stay in the South to help out with something, but you can't because you have to go close to the terminal, and you know, the buses from wherever. And I don't want to call St. David's before the St. David's busman take a turn on me, but
see, I can call but it's not just not only the outer parishes, quote unquote, that have this issue.
Okay. Because
even living in St. George, if you're not at Grand Anse, you're challenged after 7 o'clock.
So that is a really telling problem. It seems as though it's getting worse. I have heard about the appointment of a new transport, either board or commissioner, or so. I'm, hoping that this comes into play really, really soon. Tali may have more information.
Well, it's time for closing comments. So, Tali, whether you have information on this one, but closing comments because we could come into an end.
Yeah, thank you very much, Colin. I think we had a wonderful discussion this evening. I just recall that the revolution each year dedicated had a point of its program that it focused on a lot. And national liberation, I remember, was 1979, the first year that it has Day of National Liberation. But then they had education and production as one of the years, and agriculture and agro-industries was another. Economic construction was another. And interestingly, in 1983, it was a year of political and academic education. I believe that the legacy of the revolution and the contribution of the revolution to Grenada's current formation is undoubtable. Not just the international airport, but I think the entire gamut of social programs and the structure that they would have brought them into being, I think were critical, and they remain very important. The workers' rights consciousness is also very important. Something that we lost would have been the National Transport Service, as you said, which was never intended to crowd out the private sector in transport, but in order to guarantee to increase the standard of living again, to guarantee the movement of people and from place to place and at any time. And so things like that we may have lost out, but by and large, we can say that the revolution did assist in restructuring our economy to the extent where we can be building on it now with programs that are complementing those that were started, and as left entrenched, the social programs that have benefited and continue to benefit us all towards our development.
Okay, cool. Closing comments?
Nice to be here. I think it was a wonderful program. Of course, being focused more on economic development, it was Tali's forte. The contribution of the medical professionals is sort of like my soft spot, and I want to commend all of them, inclusive of the vets, the pharmacists, the agronomists, and all who have contributed to where we are today. I think without that contribution, we would have been living in a different place. It is hard to measure, it is hard to say where we would have been, but I don't think Grenada would have been the same place as it is today. If I am allowed, and if the time goes, as we speak, Dr. Dolan is the chief of our medical services. Sean Charles is actually the chief CMO. And throughout the length and breadth of the country, you have persons in the positions that are making a difference in terms of people's life and their health care, and as a consequence, the productivity of the country.
And I must add though, because I'll defend Dr. Dolan, because her scholarship award didn't come during the revolution. I believe she's a little bit younger.
Yes,
right?
but
she came from Cuba. Right?
She's specialized.
I need to give her youth, right? Ambassador Tali Francis, Dr. George Mitchell, thank you so very much for being with us, and for you, the viewers. I just want to highlight a couple of things. One, the conscientiousness, the volunteerism, the commitment to country that we need, not only for this year that we're celebrating our 50, but long beyond that. And I will probably like to signal as well to the term used, powers that be. Maybe a national transportation service is critical. Grenada is one of the few countries, certainly in the Caribbean, that does not have public transportation bringing their children to school. And then we like to hang out at the evenings, so at night as well. All right? Thank you so very much for viewing. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to being with you again 6 days, 22.5 hours from now. Good evening. God bless.